So I want to say to all our listeners, and I probably should have paused a little bit there, but I didn't. But I want to say to all our listeners that we have gotten kind of popular. We've gotten several thousand, actually we're a little over 10,000 downloads at this point, which is really good. But with that comes the obligatory commercials that they just throw in.
Yeah.
And we have no control over what those commercials are. Some of them are great. I've listened to some of them. Some of them are from Orchard Home Sales. Some of them are Xfinity. But there's one that doesn't really align with our podcast. And there's nothing I can do about it. And I just want to apologize that if right before, because typically the commercials will be right after McKenna says, "Are we there yet?" and right before we start talking. And then there'll be probably two more at the end of the podcast. And there's one of them that talks about a TV show that's on Discovery Plus. It's called, what's it called, Kyle? What was the name of that? Pleasure
Like
Love Island.
Love Island or
yeah,
Pleasure Island? Or...
Love Island or something. And it's one of those reality shows where they all go to an island and get somewhat obscene with each other. So, just so we understand, I didn't have anything to do with that, and I can't control it. And the fact that it comes on my podcast is a little embarrassing. So I'm sorry.
What's that little caveat that some radio stations, we're not affiliated with the advertisers.
The views and opinions
Yeah.
expressed by our advertisers do not reflect those of management.
I knew there was a reason why you were here, Kyle.
Like our lawyer over here on the side.
So we got a full house tonight.
We do.
We got our buddy Justin sitting next to us.
Woohoo.
We got Kyle sitting over there as somewhat of a guest host with his little dripping springs or whatever background behind him. And
That would be the San Marcos River.
Yeah, whatever. And then we have our special guest tonight. What am I? Oh, yeah. Our special guest tonight. Oh, that's laughing. That's not applauding. Oops, that's the wrong one. You made me push the wrong button. You are going to get me in so much trouble.
I got a limited memory space right now.
That was supposed to be applause.
Yeah.
And the applause is for Heather, my lovely wife. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm okay.
You look awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I love to see you in headphones. Ooh, I got to look. So, yeah, we've got a full house tonight, and I think we've got a pretty good podcast, I think. But first, we need to start with some weird news.
Are you waiting on me?
So a man in Alaska was rescued after a week of fighting a grizzly bear. He fought a grizzly bear for over a week. Richard Jesse is a miner out of Nome, Alaska. And he was up around his mine, and he was doing mining things. And he was riding his ATV back to his camp when a grizzly bear came and ripped him from his ATV, drug him through the river where he lost his phone, and then began to eat his four-wheeler. So Richard, who was injured, was able to get himself back to his cabin, but he was injured and he couldn't walk that well, and he had lost his phone. So now he's stuck 40 miles from Nome. He can't walk back, and every night the grizzly bear came back.
What?
And every night he had to fight the grizzly bear from getting into his cabin. Already injured, and the grizzly bear kept gnawing on the door, kept beating on the windows, and just about was able to get in every single night. And so after a week, he was able to paint the letters SOS on top of his cabin. And a Coast Guard helicopter come flying by about a week later, and they saw Jesse laying on the ground with a white flag waving it, and they were able to rescue him. Now, here's the weird thing. The Coast Guard helicopter was not supposed to be there. They had some weather come in, so instead of going down one of the rivers that they normally go to get to Nome, they diverted over to this particular river to avoid the weather, and they happened to see Jesse. Jesse was flown back to Nome and supposedly doing okay now. Can you imagine having to fight a grizzly bear not once, but for an entire week?
What the heck, man?
Yeah, he's lucky that it was those guys and not me and you that were finding out about the grizzly bear, because we would have said, grizzly bear? Yeah, sorry, dude, you're on your own.
Well, the Coast Guard had no idea that he had been fighting the grizzly bear. They just knew they saw a white flag, and how, if they'd have known what was waiting for him down there. But apparently, he was rescued with no incident, so he was fine.
Wow.
And I got another one.
Well, why didn't he have a weapon?
He did. He had a pistol, and the report said that he was down to his last 2 bullets. So I don't know if he was a bad shot, or but that's a good question. But
Saving the last 2 bullets for himself.
well, saving at least one, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't have bears in Texas.
No, we do. We actually do.
Not like those.
No,
bears.
not like those bears. They just introduced a couple of years ago, probably about 7 or 8, 10 years ago by now, but the Louisiana black bears back into Texas, but they're overgrown dogs. They're not that big. I've seen one. They're cute. I don't think I'd pet one, but
No.
they're kind of cute. So I got another one for you.
Okay.
I got a real live Jonah.
Okay.
A lobster diver in the Cape Cod area was swallowed by a humpback whale.
Oh my gosh.
Serious. He was down diving with his that's his job. That's what he does. He dives for lobsters. And he was down diving. Michael Packard was diving, and all of a sudden he said everything went dark. He didn't notice anything, he didn't feel anything, it didn't seem different. Just all of a sudden everything went dark. And he was kind of being sloshed around and bumped around, and it took him a few minutes, but after a few minutes with his flashlight and everything else, he figured out he was inside the mouth of a humpback whale.
What?
Of course, he had dive gear on, so, I mean, he was okay, but, of course, the humpback whale needs to swallow at some point. Apparently, he did whatever he could. His buddy was back on the boat, had no idea what was going on. Never saw anything. And apparently he was in there for what he thought was probably a lifetime. Maybe he thought it was 3 days, but it was actually about 40 seconds.
What?
And
So
then
may I interject
not yet.
for a second?
Not yet. Then the
Okay.
whale breached
Okay.
and spit him out.
Sweet.
And he flew in the air about 20 or 30 feet with full gear on, right in front of his buddy's boat. That's what his buddy saw, was him coming out of the whale's mouth right in front of him.
What?
It must have tasted bad.
Yeah, it must have been horrible.
That's awesome.
And so he got sent to the hospital, but he had just a couple little bumps and bruises, but he was fine.
Oh my gosh.
Swallowed by a humpback whale.
Wow.
And that's why I don't go scuba diving. I don't swim with sharks.
Well, that wasn't a shark. That was a
I don't
whale.
care. They live there. It's their home.
They do.
So
Right.
for the people that have actually followed this podcast, I'm sure you heard the episode regarding the parasailing, which was really about Troy's road to where he is now and finding God and all of that. Well, part of that road that he has not discussed yet was when he went night diving and decided to wrestle with an octopus
What?
at about 50 or 60 feet
It's true.
underwater. And yeah, that was one of the other times that Troy cheated death
Well,
and probably played a role in the path that he's on now.
all right. You're right. I was in Guam and I was night diving, and we were actually looking for lobsters, and we'd found a couple. But shortly before this night dive, I had eaten octopus, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. And we were on this night dive, and I don't know if you know, but with a night dive, you've got a flashlight. That's all you can see. Wherever that beam of that light is, that's it. That's the only thing you can see. And I saw this octopus move. And I went, oh, wow. And I chased the octopus down, and I reached down, and I grabbed the octopus. The only problem is he grabbed back. And
Times 8.
and he had 8 arms, and I've only got 2. And so I've got this octopus in one hand, holding him as far away from me as I can, because he had about 4 or 5 foot long legs. I mean, he was a large octopus. So I'm holding him out as far as I can, and I've got my flashlight shining on him so that I can see, because if I move the flashlight, I can't see him.
Right.
And I was trying to figure out whether or not I could go and get my knife, because apparently I thought way too long because the octopus had decided I'm going to get out of here one way or another. And he reached up, and that octopus grabbed my regulator. And he was able to pull and start tugging on my regulator, which is basically, if you don't know what a regulator is, it's what you breathe out of. So he's trying to pull my air out. Meanwhile, I'm trying to find a knife, and just this utter chaos ensues. Of course, he's inked me about twice by now, so there's black water everywhere. And my buddy, who was supposed to be right next to me, was not to be found. And finally, he comes up, and I'm about screaming through my mask and my regulator, and he reaches over and sticks his thumb in the gill of the octopus and flips his head inside out.
What?
And the octopus went limp immediately. It was that easy. I didn't know that.
Who does?
He did. And, of course, he's laughing and having a very good time at my expense, and I had about 9,000 hickeys on my arms and neck from the suckers. Anyway, thanks, Kyle. Wasn't going to bring that one up.
Sure.
I understand you've got some bulletins for us over there?
Yeah, I have some lines from various church bulletins that someone was nice enough to accumulate in one spot and make it easy for me to find. But the first one is, this being Easter Sunday, we will ask Miss Lewis to come forward and lay an egg on the altar.
Talented.
The next one, the associate minister unveiled the church's new tithing campaign slogan last Saturday. I upped my pledge, up yours.
You know, I've wanted to say
The
that a few times.
60s, The over 60s choir will be disbanded for the summer with the thanks of the entire church. One more.
Okay.
The sermon this morning, Jesus walks on the water. The sermon tonight, searching for Jesus.
I think that'll do it for weird news. So on September 9th, 1956, a young man made his television debut. However, the problem was that the man was so offensive that the TV crew and the camera crew was told to film him only from the waist up. Apparently, his gyrations were so vulgar that they didn't want to see his hips or anything below the waist. This man's name was Elvis Presley, and the show was The Ed Sullivan Show. How did we get from there to here? Because now it's perfectly fine to see a naked Miley Cyrus coming in on a wrecking ball, or we can see Katy Perry's boobs of whipped cream spraying everywhere, and not to mention Cardi B's new song, WAP. And I'm not going to tell you what that is. Go look for yourself. There was a day that when saying darn on TV was about as far as we could go. Now we've got movies like The Wolf of Wall Street making records on how many F-bombs he can get in 90 minutes. When did our moral standards get so low? Used to, the show Will and Grace, that was a very edgy show. Now there's not a show on TV where there's not at least one gay couple in the mix. We have commercials for HIV meds that are showing gay men and trans men as though it's just perfectly normal. We have commercials for ED medication for men who have an issue. I even saw one the other day with a disclaimer on it that said it was not proven to be effective for those people assigned female at birth. Why do we have to make the distinction? What is assigned female? Ladies and gentlemen, the frog has died. What do I mean by that? A long time ago, somebody told me that the best way to boil a frog was not to throw him into hot water, but to throw him into cold water and turn it up little by little by little until eventually it was boiling and it killed the frog. When did we start normalizing sin? How did we get here? Can we ever get back? I mean, we all sin. That's the reason that Jesus came. That's the reason that Jesus died, and that's the reason that Jesus was resurrected. But when did it become okay to have parades and celebrate our sin? And then to call it pride, of all things, to call that celebration pride, one of the 7 deadly sins where most sins all start. Not only that, but if I don't conform and comply to your sin, then I'm the bad guy. I'm the homophobe. I'm the one that's shunned. And I love gay people, don't get me wrong, but I hate the sin of homosexuality. But I love the person. What I hate is celebrating the sin. When will it be okay for a pedophile to have a parade? Or a porn lover to have a parade? Or a thief or a murderer? I mean, we already have porn conventions. These are things that we used to be hidden. These are things that people used to do in secret. I remember when I was about 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old, somewhere around there, and a buddy of mine, usually Kyle, would get a new Playboy magazine from his dad's stash. And we would take it in the woods, and we would go to our special little fort, and we would hide, and we would look at it. But we would hide because we knew it was wrong. We knew what we were doing is wrong, and we knew that we shouldn't be doing it. So we hid from everyone else. When did the hiding go away? In 1956, we could not accept the wiggling hips of Elvis Presley. But in 2021, a carefully choreographed scene of a man and a woman having sex on primetime television is perfectly okay. We're inundated with condom commercials and vaginal ring commercials saying to our kids, hey guys, sex is great, come have some with no consequences. I remember buying my first condom. Justin, I don't know if you remember.
I wasn't there.
No. Buying your first condom. But I remember when I was buying mine, I went to a drugstore because they had them in the convenience stores, but they were right behind the counter.
Yeah.
And there was no way I was going to ask the guy behind the counter, please hand me one of those Trojans XXX in a size small. There was no way. So I went to a drugstore, and even then I had to make sure that I had about 750 other items to go with it and try to slip it in because I was embarrassed, because I knew that what I was doing was wrong. Back in the 80s, girls that would have sex or was known to have sex, they were considered sluts. They were considered easy, and you didn't hang around with them. If a girl got pregnant in high school, she left. She went to a private school until she had the baby, and then maybe or maybe not, she may come back. Now there's a TV show that celebrates teen moms and shows them off as heroes. I remember a show called Three's Company. Remember Mr. Furley? Yeah. Jack could only rent the apartment with Janet and Chrissy because he was gay. It's kind of a twisted morality Mr. Furley had, but at least he had a morality. There was no way he was going to let a man live with 2 girls in an apartment complex. And now even our churches are gathering in. Our churches are starting to come in and say that they're okay with a lot of this sexual immorality. Every religion just about, the Anglicans, the Baptists, the Catholics, the Lutherans, the Methodists, and yes, even the Pentecostals. There is actually a Pentecostal group called the Gay Apostolic Pentecostals, of all people. And there's hundreds more, not to mention this progressive Christianity. Don't even get me started on that yet. We'll get to that one day. Where does it stop, and how are we, the conservative Christians, supposed to respond to this ever-increasing normalization of sin? Now, I know I focused on sexual immorality here, but that's just because that seems to be what's in our face. That seems to be what we all see right now. But it doesn't stop with just sex. We're actually having to fight right now, and we're losing this fight to save babies from being murdered on a scale that is insane. There is an average of 2,362 babies killed every single day. That's almost 1 million babies a year. Recently, we did have a few victories in Texas and Florida with the heartbeat bill, but that's not near enough. But here's the thing. Sometimes we as Christians have a tendency to rank our sin as if lying is not near as bad as stealing. And stealing that's not near as bad as murder. And yeah, I took the Lord's name in vain a few times, but it's not like I killed a baby. The word sin is from an archery term. It's a Greek word called hamartia. It simply means to miss the mark or the target. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if you miss it by an inch or by a mile. It's still a miss. Sin is sin. One lie keeps us out of heaven. One stolen paperclip from work. One lustful thought. Yep, that's right, thought. Jesus said it himself in Matthew 5:27 and 28 when he said that you've heard that we shouldn't commit adultery, but I tell you this, if you have lustful thoughts of a woman, you've already committed adultery. Again, in 1 John 3:15, he talks about hating someone, and he equates hating someone with murder. We as Christians have to stop ingesting what the world feeds us. We have to see sin as what it is and avoid it at all cost. Romans 12:2 says this, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. In other words, we need to see sin for what it is and hate it like God does. Then we will be able to see the goodness God has planned for us. And that's what I want to talk about today. How did we get to a point where sin has become the norm and we've just ignored it? And what are we supposed to do about that?
Man. It's a big subject.
It is a big subject, and it's been happening for a long time.
Yeah. And I'm glad we have our guest here to help us flesh it out.
I am.
No, I'm here to get help, actually. I had a coworker a few weeks ago who came to me, and she had just flown back in early that morning and came to work. She's a nurse. And we went down and got breakfast. And she's like, I wasn't expecting to tell anybody that I work with about this. And she just teared up. She's got 5 boys, all grown, except for one in high school. And her middle son came to them while they were out of town at a wedding for a cousin and came by their hotel room late that night and had told her that her and her husband that he was getting divorced. They knew he was getting divorced, but that there was more to it, and that he actually is getting divorced because he's gay. And so he's leaving his wife, who he's been married to for a year or two, and she's devastated. She didn't know.
Yeah, of course.
She didn't see the signs, and she didn't know how to react. Her husband just got angry and told him to get out, that it was really late, that they'd talk about it later. But I'm just sitting there at breakfast going, I don't even know how to respond to this.
Yeah.
And we have gotten to a point in our culture where it's normal. It's no big deal. It's normal. And it's not just gay.
Oh, no.
It's not, there's so much more to this, Another friend of ours, they're getting divorced. Just in the last month, we found out that he's been having an affair with her best friend, and they're getting divorced. House is already on the market. It's already sold, and it's a hot mess, and it's devastating. It's devastating for both families, all the children involved. It's, you sit there and go, how did these 2 grown adults think that this was going to end well? And it's really, really bad. And our culture just gets to where it's like, it's okay.
Right.
No big deal.
Right.
And I mean, these are just the people that, have come into our lives and, and that have told us this. I mean, we sit there and go, how many more people are going through so much stuff?
Right.
And how do we get to the point where we focus on leading people back to Jesus and away from sin? That's the thing. It's not. It's not just the sexual aspect of sin. It's so many different things.
Right.
We just sit here and go, we almost don't even think about it anymore. It's become so normal in our lives that we see things, we hear things, and we just don't even.
Well, look, okay, yeah.
Blink.
Yeah, let's take it away from sex and go to a different direction real quick. And remember this time last year, what was going on in the streets of Seattle, what was going on in the streets of Portland, all these riots that were going on that, we saw as wrong. We saw as you're hurting people, you're destroying people's property, you're stealing from people, you're killing people. And some groups of political groups saw it as, well, they have a right to go out for their opinion. They saw it as them expressing their opinion rather than stealing and hurting and killing and doing these horrible acts that, we sat back and like, oh, how can we allow this to continue? And they just let them go. They just let them keep doing it.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, sex is the thing that's in our face. Sex is the thing that we see, unfortunately, come through our televisions every single night. But yeah, it's everything, Justin. Where did this start? Where did we go wrong? When did the frog get thrown in the cold water, and when did the heat start getting turned up? Can you even imagine when that was?
I think it was the day of the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when it started.
Well, yeah. But didn't America used to be better than this?
Well, so maybe I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here. In your monologue, while 100% agree with everything, it seems like the heart of people has always had a bent towards sin. It was just the expression of it maybe has become more mainstream. You guys would sneak away and look at things, and I would sneak away and look at things, and we would sneak away and smoke things. If the desire wasn't there to begin with, there wouldn't be a temptation to do any of that stuff.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
But the difference is we knew it was wrong, and we didn't parade it in front of other people. I mean, that doesn't make it any better. I'm not trying to justify it by any sense of the imagination. What I'm saying is back then was a little bit different time that, we didn't, when we did something wrong, we knew we were doing it wrong, and we made sure that others didn't know we were doing it, or at least we tried. And that seemed to be,
We weren't proud of it.
Yeah, there was no parades.
We weren't proud that we were doing things wrong. We were doing sneaky things that we shouldn't have been doing probably, but we definitely didn't want to get caught.
Right. And we knew that, the old saying that your grandmother always said, Jesus is watching, and we knew that. But at that time, Jesus was this little person who, he's not the one going to whip my butt. My daddy is. But even the adults, the porn industry was very, it was behind, you had to go to special shops that were out off the highway 20 miles outside of town that were barely lit up just to be able to find a pornographic movie. Now, well, of course.
My cousin.
Your
produces
cousin. Yeah.
porn videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're producers.
Now you want to hear a funny story about that? I know this is a serious topic, but there is a funny story behind that. Remember when we were having our gala?
Yes.
Okay. All we knew is that her cousin was a producer.
No. I knew. Well, I didn't even know she was a producer at that point. What I knew was that her husband was a stunt double. He was a stunt double.
They were in Hollywood,
LA for years. That's what his career was. I thought he was still doing that. I also knew that they went to Comic-Con, and I know that they know people.
Yeah,
that's where.
So we knew that they were rubbing shoulders with Hollywood elites and stuff. And they lived in San Bernardino, and so they were in that little area. So we wrote her cousin a letter, asking them, "Hey, if you could find something in your industry and maybe donate it so that we could put it up on auction, that would be awesome. That'd be really cool. Something coming out of Hollywood, that maybe you could get your hands on that other people can't. We would really appreciate any help." And though she was very sweet about it, she wrote back.
No, she wrote me back. She goes, "Do you know what I do for a living?" Like, this isn't a private message. And I said, "No, I just know that you know people."
Yeah.
I said, "I don't know." And she's like, "We produce porn videos."
Yeah. So
I'm like, "Oh," she's like, "Ha ha." She says, "I don't think I can really help you much."
Yeah. So for our adoption gala, we were we were trying to get this porn star or porn producer to send us some of her stuff.
I had no idea.
That's
I had
funny.
no idea.
Wow.
But I mean, but that's the thing is, used to now it's in your pocket 24/7. Anytime you want it, it's right there. Bless you. And so I mean, we've got that, and now I'm watching on TV the other day where these guys were somewhere they had decriminalized shoplifting, where these men were walking into a Walgreens and were stealing everything off the shelf, putting it in a cart, and walking out the door, and no one stopped them because it becomes okay. When did we get so desensitized to what was right and wrong? I mean, we used to know what was right and wrong, gosh, I mean, I just know that, the 50s, 60s, and 70s were such a different time, although that's when kind of free love started coming out, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I kind of think the origin of things just really falling apart was when the concept of separation of church and state just really got out of hand. Because not only are things becoming so prevalent and so accepted, it's becoming more common that when somebody's doing something good, they're actually punished. I'm sure that there's maybe 2 listeners out there that have actually heard of Kuntz, Texas. It's a little town in southeast Texas.
One of them sitting here. I don't know where the other one is.
I know where it is.
Yeah, well, the other one's the one who's probably speaking.
Probably.
They were censored for their very vulgar run-through banners at the football games, which said, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me."
Yes, I remember that.
And they were ordered to stop doing that, and actually had to go as far as the Texas Supreme Court to get permission to continue to have such banners. So again, these are good kids doing a good thing with a good message, and they're essentially being punished for it.
Yeah. And do you remember the blue law?
Absolutely.
Justin, do you remember the blue law?
Don't believe so.
You may not have been in Texas yet. You may have been up in wherever you were. Back in the 70s, all the way up to the early 80s, I guess, maybe late 70s or early 80s, Texas had what was called the Texas Blue Law. And the Texas Blue Law, there were certain things that were not allowed to be sold on Sundays. Obviously, alcohol, for one. But then there were other things such as you could buy nails, but you couldn't buy the hammer for the nails. You could buy screws, but you couldn't buy a screwdriver. So there were certain things like tools. You were not allowed to buy tools. You were not allowed to buy clothing. I don't think you were allowed to buy clothing. You were not allowed, anything that was considered non-essential was not allowed to be sold on Sunday. And that was a part of the whole Sabbath thing. It was a carryover from the Jewish Shabbat Sabbath. Of course, it was on Sunday, so it was on the wrong day, but that's beside the point. But yeah, so this blue law, and that was why car lots were not open on Sundays, because you weren't allowed to buy a car on Sundays. You weren't allowed to sell your house on Sunday. All these things that you were not allowed to do had to do with the respect for the day of rest. And then, like Kyle said, somewhere along the lines, somebody took Thomas Jefferson's letter, which was never a part of the Constitution, stating that the church should be separated from the state, and they took it in such a manner that they twisted it completely around. And now it was like this no Bibles in school, no praying in school, no banners in Kuntz or anything else. So yeah, they completely twisted that law, that letter, and it wasn't even it's not even constitutional. It was a letter from Jefferson that they've taken completely out of context. So, yeah, I don't know where and you're right. I mean, the whole sin thing came from the fall. Absolutely, 100%. And our tendency to fall into sin, I think, obviously comes from that. But at least there was a time in the U.S., at least, I don't know about other countries, when we knew right, we knew wrong, and we just didn't shove it in your face and then call you wrong because you pointed it out. Because you're pointing out my problem, you're the one wrong. We never did that. I don't know when we changed on that. Let's take a break for just a minute, and then we'll come right back to it. Wrong button. Let's try that again. And we're back. So I guess we're here. I mean, I guess how we got here really doesn't matter. I guess, how things got where they got doesn't matter. I guess what matters is how do we as conservative Christians deal with a world that takes pride in sinful behavior? And I'm not just talking sexually, I'm talking about all sinful behavior. How do we, as what Jesus called us as salt and light, how do we add that salt and that light to a world that has succumbed to the earthly pleasures and the sin? And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, sin's fun. If it wasn't fun, nobody would do it. If the devil didn't make it enjoyable, then no one would want to do it. But it is. And so how do we get ourselves out of this situation, or do we just survive until the second coming? I mean, what's your opinion?
I mean, so the word holy means to be separated. Jesus and other places of the New Testament talk about not being a friend of the world. I mean, 1 John talks about that. So kind of bolting all this together, I think we are called to not necessarily be of the world, be in the world. I mean, not of this world shirt you're literally wearing. Not be a culture, not be a part of the culture of the world, not be assimilated into that acceptance of normalcy of sin and so forth, but live in the world in such a way where we can exhibit the light and everything else. Thinking back the last couple minutes, to kind of answer maybe your question about how we got here and everything else, could it be perhaps that sin is way more accessible and therefore we're able to indulge in it more? Because, I mean, looking back as kids, I mean, how hard was it to find those magazines? How hard was it to find, that pack of cigarettes, or that can of snuff? I mean,
right.
Maybe once a year you come across something like that and then, have a little bit of fun and then it's back to your thing, riding bikes or, whatever.
Right.
But if it was in our face 24/7, I mean, like what state would we be in? I mean, I would be a slug, absolute ridiculousness. If at 10, 12, 15 years old, I had access to the stuff I had access to now.
Yeah.
And not to mention just the onslaught of the social media stuff when it comes to image and identity through your image, popularity and all that stuff. I mean, the popular kids in school were popular because they had physical people kind of gloating over them and things like that. But to now be able to replicate that, force multiply that across multiple hundreds, if not millions of people gloating over you and
Right.
Adoring you and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, I think it accelerates people into these mindsets that are just, I mean, devastating, all while on the outside looking like it's glamorous.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these TikTokers and Facebook and YouTube, they took a playbook out of Howard Stern's. Took a page out of Howard Stern's playbook, which was this shock value. If I can shock you, if when you look at me you cringe, kind of like when you see a car wreck, it's horrible, it's terrible, but I can't look away. And I think that the social media people with all of these followers, I think they took a page right out of that book that Howard Stern, published, which was basically, let me shock the crap out of you, and you're going to want to come back to see how I shock you again. And that's going to make you popular, and that's going to drive your likes and your loves and your shares and your followers, which hopefully we're not doing that. Hopefully we're not getting followers based on any shock value, because I want to get followers based on truth. Heather, you're a nurse. You work in a very prestigious hospital in Houston. You work in a very, very difficult unit in that hospital. And you have to see the results of people's mistakes every day. And you get to see the results of people's sin every day. How do you make it through your day? And how do you talk to some of these people knowing that you did this to yourself? I mean, you've told me your stories, and and I don't want to get into specifics, but I know that you have to deal with the results of some of these people's own sins in their lives. How do you do that every day?
Well, most of the time I'm talking to the family because the patient is hooked up to a vent, unable to talk. So it's really the family that, you take on and try to comfort. And it's hard. I mean, there's no way to really sugarcoat it. It's hard. I mean, some of our cases are super sad and horrible. And, some of these people, you just look at their entire life and go, gosh, they just never caught a break. Never really had a chance. Never had. I mean, sometimes you look at the family and you go, gosh, I can see how this person ended up the way they did in that environment. I mean, and that's terrible to say, but it's true. I mean, a lot of these people just, they never had a chance to make better choices for themselves. That was just their way of life. That was normal for them. They grew up in that.
So you're saying that a lot of these people's choices, they weren't really choices. They were a product of their environment.
Everybody is responsible for their own
Sure, of course. No, I agree with you. Yeah.
And God gives everybody free will. So there's that. And I've seen numerous people who've come from nothing and have turned out to be amazing,
sure.
decent members of society. So, we can't blame it all on where they came from and how they were raised. And, they're not always a product of their environment.
Yeah. But when you have a family that doesn't focus on Jesus, doesn't focus on God, and focuses more on what feels good at the moment, and that's the environment you're raised in, you kind of have a tendency more to go in that direction. Is that kind of the experience you see?
I do. What I see pretty much across the board is people's priorities are just out of whack. And that's not just with my patients. That's with friends, neighbors. I mean, sometimes my priorities are out of whack and I have to regroup. It's just, unfortunately, it's our life. I mean, I can be on my phone looking up something for either work or whatever I need to do. I need to find a phone number or whatever. And it's so easy to always be looking at your phone for whatever. And I have to catch myself and go, I need to put that phone down.
Yeah.
Because the phone is an addiction. And it can be a really bad addiction.
Absolutely.
Just like anything else.
Yeah.
This is also can be a very sinful tool. And we all, like I said, we all sin in different ways. And I don't think it really matters, whose sin is worse. I mean, the Bible is clear on that. Sin is sin.
Right.
I just don't know why we're normalizing it. And how do my thing is, how do I protect my child from that? I don't want her thinking this is normal.
Right.
That's my thing. And I don't want to have to constantly be correcting the TV or shutting it off. It's like, oh, we can't watch Sesame Street because Gonzo's got on a dress. And now, I don't want her thinking that this is okay.
Did you hear about that?
No.
Okay, so again, off on a little tangent here. We were watching TV last night. We were watching Newsmax. I think it was Newsmax. Yeah, Newsmax or Fox or one of those. We were watching them, and not Sesame Street, the Muppet Babies, which all our kids grew up on the Muppet Babies. They did a twist on Cinderella, but this time Gonzo was upset, and the fairy god mouse or whoever he was came and asked Gonzo, "Why are you so upset?" And Gonzo said, "Because I really want to wear one of those nice fairy dresses like all the girls do,
Princess dress.
like all the princesses do." And the fairy god mouse said, granted. And so Gonzo went to the ball in a dress and his glass slippers and his nice little veil and everything else. And so now even Muppet babies aren't safe.
So what you're saying is these days Klinger is normal.
Oh, Klinger wouldn't even get an eye. No one would even think twice about Klinger these days.
I'm over here just saying I want to be able to teach my daughter at 6 years old what is normal, what is acceptable, and what is not acceptable. And it's really getting harder and harder to do that without sounding like I'm bashing something. And I don't want to bash anything. That's the thing, is I don't want to be like, oh, that's wrong. What I want to say is, you know what? This is the way God intended it. God intended for marriage to be between a man and a woman. You know, this was God developed marriage. God invented that. And that was what it was invented for.
Yeah, God did not assign you female at birth. You were a girl or you were a boy. That's how it was.
That's the thing, is I don't want her to question. And I know that kids are curious. I mean, she's gonna kill me when she's older and she ever hears this. But she was like a couple of years ago. I guess she was about 3. She was like, I want to be a boy. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but God made you a girl. And I said, you can't ever be a boy because you're a girl. And she goes, oh, I really want to be a boy. And I said, okay, why in the world would you want to be a boy? Like, boys have stinky feet and boys smell and they're dirty because they don't take a shower very often. Why would you want to be a boy? She said, because they can pee standing up. I don't even know how she knew that. But she didn't want to have to sit down to pee. That was her whole, she didn't want to be a boy. She just wanted to be able to pee and then run. She couldn't do that.
Because it takes way too much time to have to pull your pants down, get up on the toilet, wipe it. Yeah. I get it.
So, you know, but you sit here and you go, how do I sit here and raise her the way that God has designed her to be as this woman and do it right in this world where everything is screaming this, and this is okay.
You know, I think maybe instead of the world making it harder, maybe the world's making it easier.
I don't know, because I definitely don't want to bash. I want to make it very clear that I have gay friends. A very, very close friend of mine is gay. And I mean, and he knows that if he called me today, I would do whatever I could for him. I mean, that's just our relationship. And, you know, I sit here and go, I don't agree. I don't agree with his behaviors and what he does with, you know, his person, his significant other. I didn't mean to, if that was disrespectful, I certainly didn't mean it. But on the other hand, you know, I want to stress that we need to cover these people in love. And that's what I told my friend from work, is I said, have you thought about just writing them a letter and say, you know what, I may not agree with your lifestyle, but I love you, and I want you to know that I love you. You're my son, and I love you. I said, I think that really needs to be stressed. You know, you can say, you know, you and your boyfriend are not coming over here to eat dinner ever, but I want you to know that I love you, and you're my child, and no matter what, I love you. And that's what needs to be stressed.
Yeah.
Is that we don't need to bash these people. I don't need to bash Gonzo. I can just try to teach McKenna, well, you know what? I guess he's playing dress up. I really don't know about that. That doesn't seem right.
Well, and I think that's it. I was saying, I think maybe the world might have in some ways made it easier for us in that we have examples of behavior, not the people, the behavior. And, you know, that, like you said, I love Gonzo. Gonzo's a great guy. I don't know who the voice of Gonzo is, but, you know, Gonzo's a great guy. And maybe Gonzo just made a poor choice. Maybe Gonzo just maybe that was a bad decision Gonzo made. And I think we can do that with a lot of these things.
Maybe Gonzo just wanted to pee standing up. Maybe there's another reason behind it.
Gonzo already pee standing up.
I understand that, but maybe it's not so much that Gonzo wants to wear a dress. maybe Gonzo wants to wear the dress because of whatever.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, and I think we could redirect all that, but you know the I don't know. Like you said, I think we need to focus. I think you're right on the old adage, love the sinner, hate the sin, and I think it gives us a lot of opportunity to point out truth to our kids that we love that person, and Jesus loves that person. That person is making some really bad decisions, and those bad decisions are going to there's going to be consequences to those bad decisions, and here they are. And here's the consequences of these bad decisions. So in some ways, I think at least we have something to point to, but unfortunately, we also have a lot of protecting to do. We have to protect our kids a lot from a lot of this.
That's what we do. I mean, we're not perfect by any means, and our daughter is very, very sweet-natured, sensitive. I mean, she doesn't play sports because she doesn't want to see people lose. She doesn't want to see people feel bad for not being great.
Wow.
So she doesn't even play at all. She's not very competitive. So to not shield, but I'm kind of coming from the whole holy thing. Again, I'm not trying to say that we're holy because, man, got problems, but to be separated from the culture of the world, like at home, we sometimes sacrifice not watching the things that we might want to watch in lieu of the shark shows or the nature shows or the things like that, while not being like an ostrich and sticking our head in the sand, but also not being forced to prematurely deal with the issues until, one, she's ready to understand the bigger picture. Two is so that those seeds of influence aren't just swirling around in her mind. And again, we don't have everything right, but I feel like my job is to just shield and kind of like drop little nuggets of truth and wisdom when she's ready, and she's really been oblivious to a lot of that stuff, even language. Like if somebody says not quite, full-blown cuss words, but even borderline cuss words, she doesn't bat an eye because she doesn't even know what it means. And is that good or bad? Well, I mean, you guys can be the judge of it. I think it's good because she's still sort of in that innocent phase where it's not affecting like her conscience until she's ready to understand the bigger picture of things.
Yeah.
It's such a hard balance to.
It is because at the same time you don't want to completely and utterly shelter to a point where your child has no idea, and then all of a sudden they're adults thrown out into the big bad world. You're like, what is all this?
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. There's that balance of protection versus knowledge, and how much knowledge do we dole out at any given time.
Right.
Obviously, by the time they're 18 walking out the door, we want them to be fully aware of what's out there.
Right.
But we don't want to do it in such a way that it destroys their childhood and their innocence.
Exactly.
Like I said.
And so I think she was in about second or third grade. She became friends with this schoolgirl who had very short hair, and they all wore uniforms, so it's not like there was a lot of weird dressing. But she was clearly trying to dress and have her image more on the masculine side, even as a young girl like that. Cora, being her friend, all of a sudden was coming home and wanting the short hair and wanting the boy shoes, and stuff like that. And man, I mean, even for and it was the Gonzo thing. I mean, she didn't want to be a boy. She was influenced by one of her friends to just go with the flow thing, and we had to very carefully navigate to where we didn't crush her soul by saying, you are not going to do this and shame on you and all that other stuff. But it was very hard to go with it, even to a point of like condoning some of it. But we didn't get everything right. But the way that we walked that out was just very gently steering it in. And occasionally we would not allow her to go sleep over and slowly phase that out. And eventually they weren't as close friends, and the influence went away, and she got back kind of to herself and stuff. And we didn't have some of those deep philosophical conversations about, gender identity and all this other junk.
Well, I was about to ask you. I mean, what do you say to
Right.
someone that says, but Justin, you're not allowing her to explore her sexuality. You're not allowing her to explore her identity. Maybe she is, a non-binary, twisted gender thing. I don't even know what they're called anymore. There's 73 of them. I don't even know what they're called anymore. But what do you say to someone that accuses you of being such a prude and being so single-minded that you're not even allowing her to express herself?
I would say you're damn right.
Good for you.
I'm not going to let her decide her life. She doesn't even know what she wants for breakfast, let alone what gender she wants to be. And as the guardian and
Such a good point.
and steward of her life, I am accountable to God for her life while she's under my care. And the last thing I'm going to want to do, stand before the holy God and say, well, I let her make her decisions. I let her eat ice cream for breakfast, and I let her, walk outside naked. No, hell no. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. And I think parents who do that, we're painting with a broad stroke here, but they need to man up. Like, they need to put on their big boy pants and big girl pants, and they need to lead their home.
Amen.
So
They do.
Preach it.
Well.
Amen. No, I'm 100% behind you. I'm 100% behind you because the things that I can't stand, I see these days, these people with 3 and 4 year olds, allowing their boys to pick the dress, allowing the girls to pick what they wear, allowing them to play with, dolls. And not to say that dolls are bad. I mean, we had dolls that were called action figures, but they were,
Exactly.
let's be honest. They were dolls. They were just family dolls. But and it was all in the way that you played with it, in the way that you did it, and we, our parents steered us in those directions. And nowadays you see these 4 and 5 year olds, they're talking about allowing what age group was it that they were going to allow this sex reassignments to? I mean, it was this obscene, like 13, 14-year-old girls that were going to be allowed to have sex reassignment surgeries. I mean, at 13, 14, like you said, you don't even know what life is yet. And their parents are allowing them to make these life-altering decisions that who knows what's going to happen in 20 years when they do find Jesus, when they do find the truth, when they do find what's right and what's wrong. And now
When they find themselves and they figure out who they are.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
I mean, I can attest that I'm sure that a lot of y'all did some really stupid stuff as teenagers.
Even way before. I remember
No.
being...
And I'm just sitting here thinking, we all made bad choices.
You married the
as
king
teens.
of stupid things as teenagers.
So,
Just thank God, and I mean that in the most sincere way. Thank God that YouTube was not around when Kyle and I were growing up.
Really.
yes.
But no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You are dead on correct that you have no idea who you are. And you had said something to me one day that didn't make any sense, but it does now because I did the research, that kids aren't even capable of making rational, not rational, but good rational decisions until the age of, what were you saying? Their brain is not fully formed or something like that. What were you saying? It's a medical thing, but you were saying something about their frontal cortex isn't even developed
it's
until they're like
not.
25.
It pretty much, yes. They're the decision-making section of the brain, their frontal cortex, is not developed.
See, so it wasn't our fault in college. We were living on half a brain. And we drank the other half away.
But the point is that, I think that as Christians, we have responsibility to love people in spite of their sin.
Yeah.
We're all sinners. We're all sinners. I mean, y'all are sinners.
Amen.
You 3 men are a bunch of sinners. And I know that. I know that. One fishing trip with y'all, and y'all are definitely all sinners, okay? So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, is that we all sin. That needs to be brought up. We all sin. We're not bashing anybody. You know? I mean, nobody's perfect except Jesus.
Yeah.
And, I just think that we have to speak truth into people.
Yeah.
I think that we get complacent. We don't want to be confrontational.
Don't want to be that religious nut.
I like to keep the peace.
Yeah.
I'm the peacemaker, y'all. I like to keep the peace until I've had enough, and then I'm not peaceful anymore. You know, and Troy knows all about that.
Yes, I do. No, I agree with you 100%. And I think that, the solution, I don't know if it's a solution, but I think the answers that we're kind of coming up with, is that number one, like Justin said, it starts at home. It starts with how we raise our kids and how we protect them from the world, because like Justin said, we're not of this world, and this is not our home. This is not where we're going to spend eternity. Not in this condition that it's in now. And then what Heather said along with that is that while we protect and while we raise our kids right, we need to be loving on others as well, and sharing as much truth as they will allow us to share, and not give up on them and not quit, and keep giving them that truth in the most loving way we possibly can, not pointing fingers and telling them you're sinners and you're going to hell, but telling them that, you know what, Jesus loves you in spite of your sin. Jesus loves you in spite of what you do. No matter, there's nothing you can do that will make Jesus not love you. I mean, it's like what Paul said, that we're all, like you said, we're all sinners. And Paul said, and I'm the worst of the bunch. Mm-hmm. But yet, like Justin said, we're holy, we're set apart. We're not supposed to be part of this world. We're not supposed to take part in the pride parades, and we're not supposed to like them. And I think the more we align ourselves with God's will, and I think this may be the problem, is that the more we align ourselves in God's will, and the more that we get in God's word, and the more we trust and lean into God, the more we start seeing the world as He sees it. And the more we see the world as He sees it, the more we begin to hate the world. Not the people in the world, but the world in and of itself, the sin that has entered the world. And I think we're able to see it easier, pick it out easier, and it disgusts us. And we turn from it because we are so trying to lean into Jesus and trying to do the right thing. And we've got those glasses of God on, and we see all this stuff that just tears us apart inside. Does that make sense?
Agreed.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, goes back to what Jesus said all along, right? Love God, love people.
Yeah.
Hate the world.
I've been thinking about, though, but what does it mean to love others? I mean, I know that's such a broad question. I'm thinking about, like, in my own life, the people who live contrary lifestyles to what I believe truth is, asking my own self and challenging myself, what does it mean to love that person that I'm sideways with, from a belief standpoint? And then I go back to, like, Jesus with the woman caught in adultery, the woman at the well. Those people had lifestyle sins. And when they confront, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, the life. Jesus was the truth. I don't have it all figured out, and I use the gym really as a test bed for ministry, outreach, things like that. But I kind of use air quotes when I say that, because it's not me going around preaching at everybody. In fact, maybe 1 out of 1,000 conversations even mentions God or mentions Jesus. But the rest of it, for me, and I don't have it all figured out, is relationship building. It's assigning value. It's making people known. I'm one of the bigger guys in the gym. People kind of respect me and everything else. And when there's a scrawny guy and I stop and I fist bump him or high five him or I spot him or I give him a tip, granted, I'm actually nobody, but he's assigned value to me because he respects me. Mm-hmm. And by me extending that same respect back to him, pausing, giving him notice, say, hey, man, I recognize you. I try to build those guys up. It does something for them. And the next time they come back and then, hopefully they'll come and they'll say, man, really struggling today. Hey, man, how's it going? sucks. Well, why is that? And then they're open enough to have that dialogue. But it doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every week. Doesn't even happen every month. I've been working out with one guy for probably 5 years now, and we've had one serious God conversation. But he was in a life crisis, and we took an hour out of our day. I prayed for the guy in the gym, and hopefully that kind of radically changed his life. Now, 5 years of relationship building to get to the point of him coming to me, trusting me with this problem, and allowing me to inject some truth into him, I think's kind of a win. I haven't given you guys a chance to answer the question, and maybe we flesh it out another time. But I just am curious, how do we love others? And I think, again, using Jesus like with the woman caught in adultery, he busted up the Pharisees, he busted up everybody else before he assigned her value, and then just said, "Dude, see, you don't need to do this anymore," and didn't even address what the sin was. She did.
Right.
It's like, we both know we don't need to say it. Just don't need to do that. Like, you're better than that. And so even people caught up in sexual sin or all this other stuff that we're talking about, I wonder, kind of like the Gonzo thing, that's a good question, is it's probably something else behind that. It's probably a lack of value that they've been given or something like that. And if we as the church walk around and just try to assign value, I mean, dude, like how much of that is ministry, and how much of that would actually change people's lives? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I know exactly what you're saying. And I remember Kyle and I actually used to own a park, a paintball park. I think we had mentioned this one before.
Yeah.
And there was one guy, actually there was two, of my employees that I worked on for years, literally years. One in particular that lived in my neighborhood, and I would always give him a ride to and from work on Saturdays and Sundays. So I saw him every weekend and spent some good quality time with him on the way to and from work. It was about a 20-minute drive both ways. And I remember asking him, pretty new into our relationship, I guess. Now he was 14, 15,
okay,
maybe 15, 16, because he worked for me. And I asked him one day, I said, Cody, do you believe in God? Oh, no, I don't believe in that hocus pocus. That's crazy. That's silly. Really? Why not? And he told me why not. And that was fine. I kind of blew it off. And then every time we would get into the car and drive, we would just have good conversations, and the conversation would always somehow come back to truth, come back to Jesus in a way, not always in name, not always in this, but always come back to that truth. And so just about every conversation we had for almost 3 years, somehow, and he got more and more comfortable with it. At first he was a little uncomfortable, but the more we talked, the more he would open up, the more he would talk about his life. And then I remember we were headed to the park one day, and his mom and dad were getting a divorce. One of them had cheated on the other one, just like we talked about earlier. But and she had caught him, and that was it. It was over there. She kicked him out of the house. It was over. And
she just about drove her Hummer through a hotel room.
Yes, she did.
That's what happened.
Yeah, and so it was over, and there was no reconciliation here at all, and he was really upset, and we were driving to work, and we were talking a little bit, and it was funny because we got to work, we started setting up, people hadn't come in yet, and I had always told him, every once in a while I would tell him, I'd say, Cody, whenever you're ready to meet Jesus, whenever you're ready for your life to change, whenever you're ready to turn your life over to a higher power, you just let me know. And I'll walk you there. Well, I'll hold your hand while we get there. Okay, yeah, whatever. All right, whatever. Well, this day, he told me what was going on, all the problems. We get to work, we start setting up, and about 30 minutes into setting up, he says, "Mr. Troy, can I talk to you, please?" And I said, "Sure. Let's go in my office." And went in my office. He goes, I'm ready. I said, I'm sorry? Because I wasn't expecting, and he goes, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to meet Jesus. And so I called Heather in, and her and I both sat there and we prayed with him and walked him through the sinner's prayer and watched him get saved right there in front of us. And it radically changed his life. I mean, he joined the Marines. He became a heck of a guy. I mean, his parents still got divorced, but it was something that helped him cope through it. And I talked to him, even now, years later, 10 years later, however long it's been. And, I said, hey, man, you still going to church? Absolutely, sir. You bet.
Wow.
I sure am. And so it really helped him through. So the point of the matter was the relationship. It took me 3 years to build enough trust in this young man's life that he began to believe what it was that I was talking about. So you're right. It's relationships. It's a lot about that. My little Chiweenie dog is in the back. I don't know if you can hear her trying to get into the studio, and she knows that there's treats in here. So
Yeah.
So what do you think, Heather? You think it's all about relationships? Because I know that you have to build those in the hospital a lot.
It's definitely about relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit here and go, why do people tell me the things they tell me? I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But
Do you find it's harder, because you used to work at the county hospital, and now you work in a quote-unquote Christian
it's
hospital.
a private hospital. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I tell people when they say things. This is a Christian hospital.
Right. Do you find it's easier to have your faith in the Christian hospital, or was it easier in the other one? Because the other one, you saw a lot of poor people, a lot of down on their luck, a lot of people that all they had was Jesus. Here, it's more of an affluent, that some people have a little more money, a little more.
I wouldn't say it's something necessarily more or less. The county, I think that I felt that I felt that we were more appreciated by a lot of the population. We were all they had. They appreciated what we did for them, anything that we did for them. Sometimes I think that, where I'm at now, it's kind of like, expected.
Yeah.
It's almost like a hotel. There's some things that I sit here and go, what in the world? I mean, we just put Alexas in every room. Every patient has Alexa in their room.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's just little things like that where I go, this is not a hospital. This is a hotel.
Right.
We have VIPs. I don't believe in VIP because I think the VIP is the sickest person, the one that's going to die first.
Right.
That's my VIP. I don't care about who's got what, money, VIP or status. It's just like my VIP is the one who's going to die on me first.
Yeah.
So there's some things, that I just have to wrap my head around and just do my job.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's the big dog. He's really trying to get in. It's okay. That's why we have a podcast like this, just so that when crazy things happen, it's not a big deal. So anyway,
I got a babysitter for the 6-year-old, and I'm dealing with dogs.
And we're dealing with the dog.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, look, let's go ahead and wrap this up. But I think, I guess the main thing that we found today that in our exploration of this is that the world's going to be the world. Ever since Adam let Eve eat the apple, I know I said it that way, and I said it that way on purpose. That it's just the world's gone to sin, and it's going to be there. It's going to get worse. I don't think it's going to get better. I don't think that the world is going to get better, and we're going to be less sinful and less in our face. In fact, I think it's probably going to get a lot worse, and until the return, and then it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
And until then, I think we just need to make all the relationships we can, speak all the truth we can, and spread all the love we can, and just hope that we can take as many with us to heaven as we can.
Agreed.
Yeah?
Yes.
Well, guys, again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Heather, for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having
It
me.
has been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
I'm sure you'll edit quite a bit of this.
I won't edit. I ain't editing a single word, not one word,
I'm good
except for
with
what
that.
Kyle said. I'm only going to edit what Kyle said because he just won't shut up. We can't get him to shut up.
He's been on mute the whole time, right?
Oh, darn it! Hey guys, like I said, we're getting kind of popular at that. I don't mean to toot my own horn at all, but
Don't get a big head.
not at all. In fact, if anything, it makes me so much more humble that you people would take the time to actually sit here and listen to us babble, and I can't even tell you how much we appreciate that. And I would love to hear from you guys. We say it every week. If you want to get a hold of us, we've got an email at exploringtheway21@gmail.com. We've got our Facebook. The way you get to that is at exploringtheway21. And then, of course, we've got our website, www.exploringtheway.info. So reach out to us, please. Please, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you can, throw us a rating on your podcast. If you believe we deserve 5 stars, please give us those 5 stars. What that does, it boosts our ratings. And the higher in the ratings, the more people that will listen to it. So if you got anything out of this and you think others will too, please give us a rating, give us a review, and share the podcast. Tell somebody else about it. That's pretty much the best way these things get around is from, other people telling you about them. Until next week, may you go out and have a wonderful, wonderful week, and God bless you. And Justin, good to see you.
You too, brother.
Heather, well, I always see you, and it's always a pleasure. Kyle, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we'll see y'all on the next one.
All right, y'all take care.